think you have to accept the fact that you're at the bottom and that the first steps are going to be painful. For attractiveness is because wealth is a proxy for competence. Something about becoming physically fit that calls to them. It doesn't matter how big the first steps you take uphill are. Even if they're trivial, even if they're shameful in their, what matters is that you pursue it to the depths. And as you pursue it to the depths, you will become transformed. And if you do that,
given that we're in a world which is comfortable and we have created buildings in which there are heavy things that you pick up and put down in the same place because it's simply so rare that you have to pick up heavy things, right?
Right.
The
We have
proliferation,
speed bumps on our roads for the same reason.
proliferation of ice baths and sauna and even reading to some extent, reading difficult things. Where should people go given that they are in a world which is more comfortable than ever before? Where should they go to encourage them to find difficult things?
Truth. Truth is what's optimally difficult. The truth is optimally difficult. It's a really wonderful thing to know. The truth is adventure. There's no distinction. Partly because if you're going to just say what you believe to be true, you have to let go of the consequences. You can't predict the consequences. Well, there's no difference between not being able to predict the consequences and having an adventure. They're the same thing, right?
Because if you knew the consequences, it wouldn't be an adventure.
It's not an adventure if the consequences are foregone.
The same as it's no sacrifice or courage if there's no risk.
Right. It's exactly the same. And so it's a wonderful thing to know that optimized adventure is to be had in the truth. Think in every given situation. So Christ says in the Sermon on the Mount that to orient yourself properly, and it's often viewed as this hippie paean, take no thought of the morrow will take care of itself. God takes care of the sparrows, he'll certainly take care of you. It's like a hippie wet dream. That isn't the core of the message. The core of the message is very straightforward. Christ says, aim up to the highest thing you can possibly imagine. So that's the relationship with God. You put what's at the pinnacle, properly at the pinnacle, and you aim at that. And then you concentrate that, and it's that, and treating other people like you would like to be treated yourself. That sets the moral frame. Then you attend to the day and the cares of the day. It's like once you've established the proper moral frame, you pay attention to the day and you live in truth. And that moves you towards that destination. You have to have the orientation right. You have to be aiming up. But then it's just a matter of, what would you say? Abiding by the truth. That's the logos that sets people free. And that's right.
Doing it properly, right? There was one of the other rules that didn't make it into your book. Nothing well done is insignificant.
Right. Yeah, well, you accrue. So Christ tells his followers in the Gospels to store up treasure in heaven, not in the places that moths can eat and rust can destroy. Well, what is that? What is meant by that? Well, it's meant by it means the same thing that you just pointed to, which is that if you run yourself through a disciplinary process, so you accomplish something, maybe you don't attain the goal you were aiming at, but you accrue a new way of looking at the world and a set of skills. Well, if you just keep doing that, you have multiple ways of looking at the world and more skill. Well, that's your storehouse of treasure. The reason women use wealth as a proxy for attractiveness is because wealth is a proxy for competence. It's not competence because you can be rich and useless. Now, it's not that easy, but it can at least happen temporarily. But women use markers of wealth to assess competence. And the competence is the treasure, not the wealth. Because if you're competent, you can be thrown into the desert and you'll make it bloom.
I've said this about people that go to the gym. So from the outside, someone that goes to the gym and has got a good body or whatever, there's the body, and this is what you get to touch during sex and when you're intimate, right? But the story that someone who has a good body tells you about the sort of person that they are is much more important, I think, than the way that it manifests physically. It's someone who is reliable, who is able to overcome hard things,
Right,
who is
right.
self-disciplined.
Disciplined.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a marker for
just this
discipline.
whole big, long laundry list of things. They're able to deal with pain and discomfort, which is kind of sexy in a way.
Well, and it's the perfect materialist disciplinary strategy, right? Because it's very concrete. Well, you change your body. It's like, is that a spiritual pursuit? Well, it is insofar as it requires, long-term discipline and sacrifice. And you might hope, and I think this is likely the case, that, you can get stuck in the bodily self-improvement niche and focus on that too obsessively, but you can also use it as a stepping stone to discipline pursuit itself. And lots of people do that.
I think I told you the last time that we chatted about the manopause, this thing that I'd come up with. So I noticed toward the end of my 20s that lots of guys who had been training with a particular modality, usually bodybuilding, usually exclusively for the way that they looked, realized as they approached their 30s that they were getting out of breath going up a set of stairs and that they maybe couldn't touch their toes, and they looked fantastic. But no, they just felt like they should maybe start to value different things. And they then changed their training, and they would go and do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or yoga or CrossFit or, some other form of whatever. And that precipitated a change in everything else. And I saw this in myself, right? I get toward the end of my 20s. I've achieved success in many of the ways that society tells a young man that he should value success. There was a discordance. Something felt off. And you then think, okay, well, maybe I need to assess whether or not the things that I've been told I should want are things that I actually want to want. And very quickly you realize, I don't know, it feels like a quarter-life crisis. I think so many men go through this. They go, I either succeeded or didn't succeed at a game that I was told that I was supposed to value playing. And upon reflection, I really don't care for it as much as I thought I did. Maybe there was some elements. I was so proud of what I'd done with my business partners. I was so proud of the things that we'd achieved. But then there was other stuff where I was like, why have I attached so much of my sense of self-worth into this and this and this? And then you have to assess. And
So this is what happens in the story of Exodus when Moses encounters the burning bush.
Hey everyone, just a quick break. I hope you're getting some good stuff out of this. Stick around because there's always more to learn. If you enjoyed the video, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you don't miss any new episodes. Thanks for watching.
So he's just going about his business as a shepherd, and he's doing all right. He's got 2 wives. He likes his father-in-law. He's well regarded in this new country that he's in. He's left Egypt, where there's a price on his head, essentially, for killing an Egyptian who was tormenting one of the Hebrews. Anyways, Moses is just going about his business as a shepherd, which was a very tough job in those days. And this thing catches his eye, this glimmer, this gleam, and he goes to investigate. Okay, so what does that mean? It means as you're progressing through life, something will capture your interest. And in the story you just told, it's like somebody decides they're going to start going to the gym. There's something about becoming physically fit that calls to them, right? Which is an interesting thing, right? Because it calls to them. It's not even necessarily a decision they make. It's more like a possibility that makes itself manifest that's of interest. So they decide to pursue it. So they look into it more deeply. Well, so Moses approaches the burning bush, and he gets closer and closer, right? And a bush is a symbol of life, right? Like it's a tree of life. And a tree of life that's on fire is being, that's the life, the tree, and becoming, that's the fire, the transformation. So a burning bush is a symbol of being and becoming as such. Now, it's something that beckons. Okay, so now you pursue your physical fitness because it's called to you, and you concentrate more and more on it. You get more and more disciplined. But as you get more and more disciplined, you start to transform, right? And so your vision starts to change. Now, what happens to Moses is that as he gets closer and closer to the burning bush, he starts to realize that he's on sacred ground. So he's going deeper. The investigation is taking him deeper. So he takes off his shoes and continues to approach. He's still going down the same trail, right, pursuing this thing. And then the voice of God itself speaks to him from the midst of the burning bush. And that's what turns him into a leader. And so what does the story mean? It means that as you walk through life in your normal mode, things will call to you. And if you pursue them, they will take you deep. It doesn't really matter what it is that calls. What matters is that you pursue it, and you pursue it to the depths. And as you pursue it to the depths, you will become transformed. And if you do that without reservation, that will turn you into that will turn you into the person who frees the slaves and opposes the tyrants. And that is how it works. That's the call. And that can happen in any direction, virtually any direction. You just have to pursue it with sufficient faith, right?
Station around people who try their best, do as many things right as they could, and yet still fall short because the world is random and unfortunate things happen. Happiness, as far as I can see it, sits in the gap between your expectations and reality. But the problem here is that people who have high standards often end up feeling a lack, right? How can people who strive like this avoid feeling despondent at falling short of their own high standards? I've heard you talk about the statue of David saying something like, "You are not all that you could be."
Yeah.
And as soon as you posit an ideal, you begin to compare yourself to that ideal.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's a good question. I mean, the ultimate ideal is also the ultimate judge, because the ultimate ideal is something against which you fall far short. And that might be so painful that you can barely stand it. But then what you do is you two things, I suppose, is you lower the ideal and you raise your estimation of your potential. And what do I mean by lower the ideal? Well, if you're comparing yourself to someone or even to a future self, and the gap is so painful that it paralyzes you, then you've created a dragon that you don't have the tools to master. And so what you have to do is you have to scale the dragon down to size. And you want to scale the dragon down to size until it's a size that you are willing to move toward, however small that is. Now, if you're here and your ideal is here and that gap is unbearable, then you reduce the gap and you reduce the gap. And you're going to have to do that anyways, because you're not going to move from where you are to perfect in one fell swoop, right? There's going to be incremental steps. So you have to fill in that hierarchy of progression with a high enough resolution representation so that you can start to move forward. And then you should be buttressed. There's another gospel comment that's very interesting. It's called the Matthew principle. And the Matthew principle is, to those who have everything, more will be given. And from those who have nothing, everything will be taken. Now, it's brutal because it implies that reality works like this. When you're moving up, you go like this, right? And that's pretty nice. That's a lot better than this. But when you're going down, you go like that, right? It's like downhill, cliff. Okay. So you want to avoid the downhill path. Well, if the uphill path is like this, which is like exponential, let's say, or geometric, then what that means is that it doesn't matter how big the first steps you take uphill are, even if they're trivial, even if they're shameful in their size, because you're so useless, that if you're disciplined in that, you'll speed up extraordinarily rapidly. And so that's the good news, you might say, is that you can take very small steps, even ones that might be shameful in their size, and you have to admit that to yourself. But once you get the ball rolling, it doesn't roll in a linear fashion, it rolls in a geometric fashion. And this is a really good thing to know, because it can take the sting out of the realization of your own stupidity. It's like, everybody has their weak sides, let's say, things they're embarrassed about. When I first started going to the gym, I was like, how old was I? 1985, 23. And I think I weighed 135 pounds and I was 6'1", very, very thin. 27-inch waist, something like that. And I smoked like mad and I drank too much. Like I wasn't in good shape. The first attempts forward I took in the gym, I went to this swimsercise class. Jesus, it was me and this like really fat guy, young guy, probably not in any worse shape than me, and like 7 old women over 70, and they could outswim me. Like it was pretty damn humiliating. And so I did a semester of that and got myself in somewhat better shape. And then I started to go to the gym to work out, to lift weights. And that was also rough because, I'd be underneath the bloody bench press trying to lift 75 pounds off the rests. And, some muscle-headed bastard would come over and tell me how to do it. And it's like, yeah, thank you. But, it's embarrassing. And lots of times people won't do things like go to the gym because they're so embarrassed about how they look or what sort of shape they're in. And it's a pain to start at the bottom, but you start at the bottom where you're weak. And if you want to rectify what's weak, you have to accept the fact that you're at the bottom and that the first steps are going to be painful. It took me about 3 years, but I stopped smoking and then I stopped drinking and I gained 40 pounds of muscle in like 3.5 years, something like that. I basically had to stop doing that because I had to eat like 6 times a day. It was crazy. But I got a lot more physically confident and a lot more coordinated, because working out with dumbbells makes you coordinated, right? Because it exercises all the small ligaments and the tendons. And so my lower body in particular got a lot more coordinated. Then I could dance. So that was better when I was going out dancing, because I did a lot of that in graduate school. But the point of all this is, if you're going to rectify your weaknesses, you have to admit your insufficiency to your own shame. Now, if the gap between you and your ideal is so great that it paralyzes you, you shrink that, right?
Jordan Peterson, ladies and gentlemen. Jordan, thank you so much for today. I'm looking forward to the next time we get to catch up.
Good to talk to you, Chris.
In a conversation between host Chris Williamson and guest Jordan Peterson, the discussion revolves around how people can find meaning and challenges in a world that has become very comfortable. Peterson suggests that pursuing truth, which is inherently difficult and unpredictable, is a form of adventure. He ties this to the concept of aiming for the highest ideals and living truthfully, which he connects to teachings from the Sermon on the Mount. Peterson emphasizes that discipline and hard work, whether in physical fitness or other areas, build competence and resilience. This competence is a true form of wealth, as it enables individuals to adapt and thrive in various situations. He argues that even pursuits like bodybuilding can lead to greater discipline and personal transformation, drawing a parallel to the biblical story of Moses and the burning bush. According to Peterson, following one's interests and diving deeply into them can lead to profound personal growth and the ability to affect change in the world. Williamson adds that many men experience a shift in priorities as they approach their 30s, often reassessing what they truly value beyond societal expectations of success. This introspection can lead to a quarter-life crisis, prompting a reevaluation of goals and aspirations. Both agree that meaningful challenges and personal transformation come from committing to difficult but rewarding pursuits. They discuss the challenges faced by individuals who strive for high standards but fall short due to the randomness of life. Peterson explains that happiness lies in the gap between expectations and reality. People with high standards often feel unfulfilled because of this gap. To avoid despondency, he suggests lowering the ideal to a manageable level and gradually raising one's potential. Peterson likens striving for an ideal to facing a dragon. If the ideal is too daunting, it must be scaled down to a size one can handle, and progress should be made in small, incremental steps. He references the Matthew principle, which states that those who have will receive more, and those who have nothing will lose everything. This principle emphasizes that small, initial steps, even if seemingly insignificant, can lead to exponential growth. He shares a personal anecdote about his early attempts at physical fitness, highlighting the embarrassment and challenges he faced, starting at the bottom, accepting one's weaknesses, and making gradual progress can lead to significant improvement. Peterson emphasizes that recognizing and addressing one's insufficiencies, despite the initial discomfort, is crucial for personal development. Thanks for watching.